Hello there, Treksters. Today we're going to dive into some of the many times the transporter did an oopsie on this edition of...
Yeah, it's the best five, worst five, know what I mean? Yeah, it's the best five, worst five Treks ever seen.
The transporter has been a key piece of tech in Trek since the very beginning. In fact, in the beginning, it was the only means of leaving the ship, as the idea of shuttles hadn't even been thought of, to Sulu's dismay. These rankings are pretty subjective and will be based on what happens during the transport, the outcome of the failed transport, and how interesting the overall episode it's in is. Per the norm, we're starting with the fifth worst, the Langoliers. If Reg Barkley wasn't the key focus of TNG's Realm of Fear, this entry would rank a lot worse. As usual, Dwight Schultz gives a masterful performance trying to get those around him to believe he saw something during a difficult transport. His hypochondria meeting his transporter phobia aside, the episode is pretty underwhelmingly boring, and the critters that are actually in the beam are about as badly done of an effect as the made-for-TV version of Stephen King's The Langoliers. A mass of teeth just floating there. Thankfully for the crew of the Yosemite that were stuck in the beam due to some technobabble, Reg figured out what was happening and rescued them. Number 4. Origin Story. We're introduced to the human inventor of the transporter, Emery Erickson, in Enterprise's episode Daedalus. His story about losing his son in an early transporter test is heartbreaking, but his actions trying to reconstitute him years later are dubious at best. He lies to Starfleet and his friend's son, Jonathan Archer, about what he's doing, rather than just asking for help. It costs lives and nearly sends T'Pol to a Captain Pike-style beep chair from Delta Radiation. This culminates in merely retrieving his son's body, which is not nothing, but not worth the lives lost and danger to the Enterprise in the attempt. Number 3. Gone in 8 seconds. Hoshi gets the best character growth across the run of Enterprise. From frightened of her own shadow in the first couple of episodes to capable commander in the big chair of the show's final two-parter, she gets one of the best growth arcs in all of Trek. Smack in the middle, during Vanishing Point, she experiences several days in the span of 8 seconds during a beam-out during a severe storm, where she disappears and no one can see her. Not only is this a thing that never happened in the end, which I generally hate as a trope, but it's dull. Until weird forced tension with invisible aliens trying to blow up the ship that only Hoshi can see and hear does give her a chance to get over her fear of the transporter, but otherwise a boring episode. Number 2. 2-to-1 odds. If you've ever seen Voyager even once, I don't think I need to say too much about combining Neelix and Tuvok into Tuvix, and why it's nearly the worst transporter accident in Trek. The accident itself is actually kind of interesting, but Janeway's forced separation, not so much. I don't think there's a worse case of writers writing themselves into a corner in Trek. I mean, that poor flower. And the worst transporter malfunction at number 1? Rand's nightmare. It was nice to see Yauman Rand back with a promotion in the motion picture. But the first duty we see her having to perform is probably as much of a nightmare she has to live with as the memories that drove actress Grace Lee Whitney to quit TOS originally. Never again in Trek have we seen a transporter malfunction so completely that it just anatomically inverts its subjects.
What we got back didn't live long, fortunately.
As we reconfigure the Heisenberg compensators to beam over to the best transporter incidents. If you're enjoying the content, please consider a like and subscribe. Number 5. Not all there. When Ro Laren and Geordi LaForge are declared dead, we open Trek up to some not often discussed philosophy in TNG's The Next Phase. Though, through talk about death rituals, we don't get an answer as to how they walk through walls and bulkheads, but can also walk on the floor. Also, why do the ultra-secretive Romulans test stuff right on the Federation border? In general, a very original story in Trek, but I think we'd all like to know what Riker was going to say about his rival and one-time complicated lover, Ro. Number 4. Down the Rabbit Hole. We've seen a variety of ways to go through the looking glass into the mirror universe, but the original way involved an ion storm and the ship's transporter in Mirror Mirror. While the transport doesn't play a big role overall, the consequences of this crossover are wide felt throughout the franchise, and within the Terran Empire itself, as it changes Spock's view of what's possible and sets up some great episodes and pieces in the most recent movie. Probably smart of the Mirror U to modify their transporters so a transfer couldn't easily happen that way again. Number 3. From Bajor with Love. DS9's Armand Bashir almost caused a major lawsuit from the 007 franchise, but it sure was a lot of fun letting our main characters play some poorly conceived caricatures. And we have transport from a sabotaged runabout and the quick thinking of Eddington to thank for it. While it's not their first big episode together, this is the first time Garrick and Bashir truly have a chance to bond. Avery Brooks should have gotten 3 paychecks for playing Ben Sisko, playing Hippocrates Noah, truly playing Avery Brooks.
Forgive me. Sometimes I do get ahead of myself.
It's too bad the threat of a lawsuit prevented a true follow-up to this transport mistake. Number 2. Snips and Snails. Some transporter shenanigans in Voyager's drone cause another sorta Tuvix situation when the Doctor's 29th century mobile emitter merges with Seven's nanoprobes to create a super advanced Borg drone. Unlike Tuvix, though, it's actually very satisfying watching it grow and learn about the universe around it, only to sacrifice itself to save Voyager from the collective trying to gain control of the drone. Feels a lot like Lol's story in TNG, with some very interesting additions, and the drone's tragedy hits almost as hard. And the most interesting transporter accident at number 1? Predestination Paradox. DS9's past tense is now in our actual past of September 2024, but its impact seems closer to reality than it was ever actually intended to be about our real world when it debuted in the 90s. This cautionary tale was all started by some technobabble and the Defiance transporter. Considering how things play out, it feels an awful lot like Sisko was always meant to play the role of Gabriel Bell. Given the predictive nature of the episode, Dax's conversation makes me wonder how much worse things can get in Europe while we deal with a fascist hellscape here in the US.
It's not that they don't give a damn. They've just given up.
What's your favorite transporter accident in Trek?